The message came in 4 days ago. You read it immediately. You were pleased to get it. You started typing a reply within about 90 seconds, got 3 lines in, decided it was not right, and deleted it. Then you put the phone down, intending to come back to it when you had more time and could do it properly. That was Tuesday. The message is still sitting there. You have opened the conversation 11 times since. You have composed a reply in your head while walking. You have thought about this person more in the last 4 days than you thought about most of the people you actually spoke to. And you have sent nothing. Here's the part that makes no sense from outside. If you dislike this person, you would have replied. A short, polite line dispatched in 20 seconds. No difficulty at all. The messages you answer fastest are almost always the ones you care least about, which means the silence is not indifference. The silence is what wanting to reply looks like when it goes wrong. There is a finding about what specifically goes wrong, and it is not the one people assume. Everyone thinks the problem is that they cannot think of what to say. The research suggests the problem is what you're trying to be while you say it. I will come back to it because it is the piece that actually explains the delay. Start with the mechanics, because the shape of this is precise, and most people have never looked at it directly. The delay is not one decision. It is a series of very small ones, and each one is individually reasonable. At the first reading, the message deserves a real answer, and you are on a train. Postponing is correct. An hour later, you have 20 minutes free, but now you want to give it proper attention rather than fire something off. Postponing is still correct. That evening, enough time has passed that a one-line reply would look thin, so the reply you owe has quietly grown. It now needs to acknowledge the delay as well as the message. The task got bigger while you were not doing it. By day 3, the reply has to be good enough to justify 3 days of silence, which is a considerably harder piece of writing than the one you were originally attempting. And this is the mechanism. Every hour you wait raises the standard the reply has to meet. The debt compounds. The longer you leave it, the better it has to be, and the better it has to be, the harder it is to start. And the harder it is to start, the longer you leave it. Nobody chose 4 days of silence. 4 days of silence is what you get from a series of individually sensible postponements attached to a rising bar. That explains the escalation. It does not explain why the bar was high in the first place. Now the finding? In 2018, Amit Kumar and Nicholas Epley published a paper in Psychological Science called Undervaluing Gratitude. It is not about texting, but the mechanism it describes is the one operating on your phone. They had participants write a letter of gratitude to somebody who had made a real difference in their life. Before the letters were sent, they asked the writers to predict 3 things how surprised the recipient would be, how happy, and how awkward. Then they contacted the recipients and asked how it actually felt. The writers were wrong on all 3 counts, and they were wrong in the same direction each time. They underestimated how surprised the recipients would be. They underestimated how positive the recipients would feel. And they overestimated how awkward the whole thing would be. But the detail that matters most for our purposes is what the writers were worrying about while they hesitated. They were preoccupied with whether they could express it well, whether the wording would come out right, whether they would sound trite. The recipients were not evaluating that at all. The recipients were responding to the warmth of the gesture. The researchers found that participants who felt less competent about writing the message were less willing to send it. So the barrier was not the feeling. The barrier was the performance. Now go back to the unanswered message. You're not stuck because you have nothing to say. You have plenty to say, and you have said several versions of it in your head while walking. You are stuck because you're trying to write a reply that is good, and good is a standard being applied by an audience that mostly does not exist. The person waiting for the message is not grading the prose. They are waiting to hear from you. And there is a second finding that makes this sharper. In 2018, Erica Boothby, Gus Cooney, Gillian Sandstrom, and Margaret Clark published research on what they named the liking gap. Across a set of studies, they found that after conversations, people systematically underestimated how much their partners had liked them and enjoyed their company. The explanation the authors offer is that people are excessively critical when judging their own conversational performance. You come out of an exchange replaying your own contributions and marking them down, while the other person walked away with a general impression that was warmer than the one you assigned yourself. Put those 2 findings side by side and the silence starts to look inevitable. You overestimate how badly you come across. You overestimate how awkward reaching out will be, and you're grading yourself on a dimension, eloquence, that the other person is not really assessing. So the reply gets held back for failing a test that is being marked by you. Using criteria the recipient does not share on behalf of an audience of one who is simply hoping to hear from you. There is a third layer, and it is specific to the people you care about most. Reply speed carries meaning. Everyone knows this without being told. A fast reply reads as easy warmth. A slow reply reads as distance, which means that once you're 4 days late, the message has to do two jobs. It has to say the thing you wanted to say, and it has to account for the silence. And the second job is much harder than the first, because there is no explanation that sounds good. Saying you were busy is a lie, and both of you will know it because you were not too busy to open the conversation 11 times. Saying nothing about the delay leaves it sitting there unaddressed. Saying something true that you wanted to answer properly and then it got away from you requires admitting that this person's message mattered enough to be difficult, which is a more exposing thing to say than most people can manage over text. So you're stuck between a lie, an omission, and an admission. And in that moment, the fourth option, which is to keep waiting, is much more comfortable than any of the three. Every day you do not choose, you get a small reprieve. The problem is that the reprieve costs you a slightly worse position tomorrow. I want to name something honestly, because there is a genuinely uncomfortable version of this, and it is worth separating from the rest. Occasionally, the reason for the silence is not the wording at all. Sometimes the person's message asks for something you do not want to give. Sometimes the relationship has changed and neither of you has said so. Sometimes replying would require an honesty you have not decided about yet. In those cases, the silence is doing real work. It is a decision being made slowly, without anyone having to say it out loud. But that is not most cases, and it is worth being able to tell the difference. Ask yourself whether you want to talk to this person. If the answer is a clear yes, the silence is a writing problem rather than a relationship problem, and it can be solved in about 11 seconds. Which brings us to the useful part. The reason advice like just send something usually fails is that it asks you to lower your standards. And lowering standards for someone you care about feels like carelessness. So do not lower the standard. Change what is being measured. You have been trying to send a good message. The alternative is to send a true one, not a polished account of the last 4 days, and not a witty recovery, just the accurate short version. Sorry, I have started replying to this about 5 times. That sentence takes 4 seconds to write, and it does something the perfect reply cannot. It tells the other person the delay was about care rather than indifference, which is the single question they have actually been holding, and the one thing your silence has been failing to answer. The Kumar and Epley research points the same direction. The recipients responded to warmth, not craft. A short, warm message beats an elaborate one that never gets sent by an enormous margin, because the elaborate one scores 0. And one small thing that helps more than it should. If you cannot start, reply to the smallest part. Answer one question in the message and leave the rest. The reply does not have to be complete. It only has to exist, because the moment it exists, the compounding stops. Here's the reframe worth carrying out of this. You have probably read your own silence as evidence of something unflattering. That you are bad at keeping in touch. That you do not prioritize people. That something is wrong with how you handle relationships. Look at where the silences actually fall. They cluster around the people whose opinion you care about, the messages that meant something and the conversations you most wanted to have. The easy replies go out instantly. The important ones sit there for days. Your unanswered messages are not a record of who you neglected. They are a fairly precise record of who you did not want to disappoint. That is the cue most people miss. If there is a message you have been meaning to answer for days, leave a comment and tell me how long it has been sitting there. Subscribe to Psychology Q, and I will keep showing you the signals hiding in plain sight.